Brothers, we exist for moments such as these. We once ruled the wasteland. The Brotherhood began as an act of rebellion. We will take power. The Brotherhood has lost its way. Brotherhood has become scattered, broken into dozens of rival chapters, but now we have the strength to unify them under one banner here, with the mightiest arsenal in history at our disposal. And with it, we will start a new brotherhood. Go forth with honor! And may the shape of the future be cut by your sword!
Look at the scorched earth and the bones that litter the wasteland. Millions, perhaps even billions, died because science outpaced man's restraint. They called it a new frontier and pushing the envelope, completely disregarding the repercussions. Can't you see the same thing is happening again? You're a single bomb in an arsenal of thousands, preparing to lay waste to what's left of mankind.
Power, more than all of human history could ever consume. And yet power is taken, not given.
When the Fallout show first started, I thought we were going to see main character Lucy get pulled between two different factions within the Wasteland. That being both the Brotherhood of Steel and Maximus, and the NCR and potentially a different character. But as Season 2 has been rolling out, I have come to a different conclusion, and I actually believe if there's going to be any character choosing between which faction they want to align themselves with, I actually think that boils down to Maximus, and here's why. See, one of the most common criticisms I see for the show is how the Brotherhood have been resembled so far. Both extremely religious, but also extremely unserious. With many of the knights and even chapter leaders being extremely goofy and violent, almost coming off as a raider group rather than the Brotherhood of Steel. With Quintus being the only person remaining serious or resembling any of the old Brotherhood we know of. Which in the first season was a little bit worrying, but seeing how they sort of doubled down in this season, I actually wonder if there's a purpose for this. And what I mean by doubling down is Quintus has talked about how the Brotherhood has fell off a little bit and not as righteous as they once were. In Season 1, this could easily just be a narrative plot device to kind of push the mission forward, but in Season 2, despite having the power they need, Quintus is still reminding the audience of this fact. And not only that, but we're also proven such things when we get the leaders together and see just how rambunctious they actually are. But it does seem, when it comes to the Commonwealth, they not only retain the most power out of all the chapters, but also potentially the most seriousness or most ambition. With the Commonwealth having been the ones to find out about the Enclave's mission with the cold fusion and how Wilzig escaped. So the Commonwealth enlists in the West Coast chapters in the hopes of finding this artifact. But once the Brotherhood and Maximus are able to acquire cold fusion, rather than complete the mission and return it to the Commonwealth, Quintus decides to make a power grab, reaching out to the other chapters on the west side and hopefully uniting them against the Commonwealth. And even despite the unification of them all and the unlimited power source in cold fusion, a lot of them are still very reluctant to go up against the Commonwealth. This is just indicative of how powerful and intimidating the east side of the Brotherhood really is. Still, despite Quintus gathering all these people together, the Commonwealth were of course still informed, and they sent a liaison in Xander to come and figure out what's going on. Banzer bonds with and tries to manipulate Maximus and discusses how severe things are getting for them back over in the Commonwealth. Which, for anyone who's played Fallout 4, could really only be a couple of things. Either gunners, raiders, they could still be in a conflict with the railroad, or even some Eldritch Dunwick abomination. But I think what is more likely is they could potentially be still facing off against the Institute. The Institute was formed from the descendants of the survivors of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology. In that time, they eventually used their intellect to develop the technology to provide them transportation, clean water, and drinking supplies, a whole underground facility that they could hide out in, and the creation of synths, robotic human mimics that the Institute would use to replace even common folk up on the surface, and even to infiltrate certain factions like the Brotherhood of Steel. with these synths coming off as so lifelike that it's very hard to distinguish who's who unless you actually tear them apart and find their synth components. With that being said, people have theorized that Harkness himself could actually be a synth. Most of the evidence alluding to this, however, is just the fact that another character in the series was also a synth named Harkness. But there are some terrifying implications if that theory happened to be true, as the Institute and their means of replacing people is actually a really terrifying concept. And the idea that they could have secretly taken over the Commonwealth and are simply pretending to be the Brotherhood who remained in power is actually pretty terrifying. Still, despite the narrative potential, I think the show is taking on enough plots right now that we likely won't see any signs of synths anytime soon. And despite Xander still acting like a Brotherhood of Steel member and talking about abominations and all that, we didn't really get any reveals before he tries to kill some ghoul kids and Maximus takes him out. This of course leads to Maximus trying to kill Quintus and taking Cold Fusion. And interestingly enough, we watch an amazing moment between Maximus and Quintus, as while Maximus is prepared or even reluctant to let others die, he hasn't really had to face the chance of losing someone he knows well, at least since the bombing of Shady Sands. Seems with Quintus, he didn't anticipate the emotions he'd feel facing off against him, and he just couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. And Quintus actually seemed to show a lot of sympathy for Maximus. I'm wondering what was rolling through his head when he actually thought the Commonwealth would be willing to kill a bunch of kids. In that moment, he probably felt pretty righteous in his rebellion. That is, until Maximus revealed they were ghoul children. And even then, with Quintus immediately walking over and stumbling to grab a gun, Maximus still can't take the shot. It just makes him a very interesting character, because while he isn't the smartest, he is pretty tough, and while he isn't afraid to kill, he's still not a heartless monster like the ghoul ready to kill whoever he needs to, just because it needs to be done. But not only did Maximus fail to kill Quintus, he also essentially started an entire civil war between the West Coast Brotherhood chapters, and a war between all of them and the Commonwealth. This is a civil war that is bound not to end anytime soon, and with the Brotherhood kind of becoming scattered and Quintus likely floundering to bring them all together, or maybe just destroy any threats he can, I don't believe their narrative is done with Maximus just yet. But that does lead me to a question. Will Maximus be the one to eventually bring the Brotherhood back to their glory days? Either finding power within the West Coast Brotherhood or finding aid within the Commonwealth Brotherhood? As with the rise of the Enclave, a resurgence of the Brotherhood and their more noble virtues would be pretty necessary. This could eventually lead down the line to yet another big battle between both the Enclave and the Brotherhood, and maybe finally settling a beef that's been around since the very beginning of the franchise. With the very first member of the Brotherhood of Steel and Elder Maxon discovering the experiments ran on people with FEV. FEV is something that's very heavily tied to the Enclave and potentially what they're attempting to do now. With Maximus having Cold Fusion, he could easily provide some new resurgence of the Brotherhood enough power to go up against something as powerful and hidden as the Enclave. That is, if he decides to give the Cold Fusion to the Brotherhood of Steel. But is there a chance he could instead choose to give the Cold Fusion to the NCR? Now you might be asking yourself, the NCR, all we've seen of them are shambles of an old faction that seem to be delusional about the good old days. That and a giant bolstering crater. And you also might be asking yourself, how do I like and subscribe more than once? Well, you don't press the button twice, as I believe that undoes it the first time, so, But when it comes to the NCR, I'm personally theorizing that the NCR are actually still around, and while maybe not as prominent, will have a key part to play in the story going forward. See, people often wonder why the NCR didn't actually respond when Shady Sands, its very first capital, ended up being bombed. Well, not only were they dealing with a war over in New Vegas that they potentially lost, but I also could very well see this as a wake-up call for the faction. See, they tried to re-establish society in a very public way, believing they had the resources and means to defend themselves and their way of living. However, they failed to anticipate the fact that some people could still have access to nuclear power, and some could even just simply mail a nuke straight through their door. So why wouldn't the NCR simply rebuild around the crater or some other spot in the area? Or maybe over in New Vegas? Well, I think it's obvious. Rebuilding in the same way they did risks the same exact outcome until they can ensure they're actually safe. Like most other factions inside of this show and franchise, they take a lot of secrecy and keep a lot of things close to their chest, as opening up your doors to more of the wasteland and adjusting the life of the wasteland also opens your doors to more violence and dramatic outcomes like what happened with Shady Sands. So the NCR has a choice: either simply conform to the wasteland lifestyle and be scattered and violent, or fight for the faction of the NCR in the only way they know how. And right now, the best means of doing so is to remain hidden. Consolidating resources, gathering members for your faction, building up strength, and actually regain the power they need to come back as a prominent and strong faction. Strong enough to at least resist or not completely collapse when they are attacked. And where would they get this power? Well, by potentially sending a prehistoric idol in Moldaver to collect something she knows exists in cold fusion. Something that now lies within the hands of Maximus. So now we have to wonder, is the NCR truly just shambles and being written out of the whole entire Fallout lore? Or are they specifically trying to mislead the audience for a big reveal towards the end of the season of the NCR's resurgence and helping out with a small fight, and the hope of Maximus potentially joining them, providing cold fusion, and them re-establishing themselves as a very prominent faction throughout the wasteland, and potentially the entire Southwest? Not only would this make some narrative sense, as the NCR is basically within Maximus's blood and bones, seeing as they're his original people, but there are also some trailer shots with Maximus in power armor, which last we saw he left it back in the desert, but he's also donning an NCR Ranger helmet. And while he could just randomly find this somewhere scattered around, I personally think this could be enough connective tissue to actually tie Maximus back into the NCR plotline of the story, with him potentially leading the NCR in a fight against the Brotherhood and encountering Quintus one more time. All we've seen of Maximus so far is him wanting to be a good person or simply be around good people and feel safe. And you could tell that the Brotherhood are just not the faction for him. Or Dane for that matter. Both of them honestly belong inside of the NCR as far as I can see. That or the Minutemen, but let's cross our fingers they're never brought to the series. No, in my opinion, Maximus is going to be the one to help bring the NCR back into being a prominent bastion of society. What do you guys think? Who will Maximus side with, the NCR or the Brotherhood? Was that the last we saw of the Brotherhood? What do you think could be going on back in the Commonwealth? Either way, thank you guys for watching the video. If you did enjoy it, feel free to drop a like as it does help out the channel. And let me know which faction you think Maximus will join by the end of the story. Either way, have a good one, y'all.
200 years of planning in order for everything to go just right. That seems like a lot of work if you ask me.
Obsolescence. It's a heck of a thing. You know, I try and see it from your perspective. But it's hard to imagine being so dim as to be caught off guard by the inevitable.
Plans are hard. Chaos, though. Chaos is easy.
Power. More than all of human history could ever consume.
Okie dokie.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.